What's up everyone, Vu of NVU Films, your friendly neighborhood tube douche, not sponsored by Squarespace and or Storyblocks, back with another idiotic video for you to watch. And today's idiotic video is idiotic because I'm about to compare the Sony a7S III versus the a7 III for video use. And why is this video idiotic? It is idiotic because the answer is simple. The a7S III is the better camera for video. It's obvious. And if you don't believe that, you can go ahead and get slapped by a massive BBC across your face. BBC 2S, as in big black crane 2S right across your face, and you can have a nice day. Moving on to more serious matters, let's talk about the actual hardware, the ergonomics of these two cameras. And right off the bat, I will tell you this, the Sony a7S III has better ergonomics. Why? The grip is much more girthy. This grip reminds me of a flaccid junk, while this grip is like a junk that is massively erected, and it feels really nice in the hand, ready for action. Matter of fact, this grip is almost as girthy as my Asian junk when I see two massive bowls of rice on the dinner table when I am hungry AF. AF as in autofocus. With that being said, let's talk about what actually matters. It's the video quality, right? We all know the Sony a7S III has 4K, 24, 60, 120, all available with 10-bit, 422, internally, including external ProRes RAW. Also, it has multiple different codecs for you to choose from, while the Sony a7 III is limited to basic 8-bit 4K 24, however, downscaled from 6K to 4K, making the actual 4K footage noticeably sharper than the a7 III's just simple, slightly oversampled 4K footage. However, Sony's 4K and pretty much every other video codec format, 1080, whatever, has pretty much no rolling shutter, while the a7 III suffers by a pretty good amount of rolling shutter, which makes the handheld footage a little bit rough in terms of how it looks in terms of IBIS. What I've noticed with Sony cameras is the IBIS has been known to be not that good, but the biggest reason why the IBIS seems so horrible is because of the rolling shutter. Meaning every time you take a little bit of a step with your foot and the camera takes a slight quick movement, it's not just the IBIS that causes that little jittery look, it is the fact that there is a significant rolling shutter. Whereas the Sony a7S III, when you're doing handheld footage and you're walking, even with standard IBIS, it still looks a lot better than standard IBIS on a7 III, mainly because the fact that there's no rolling shutter. So sudden movements does not jiggle, does not wobble, etc. On top of that, it does have active mode in 4K 24 and 4K 60, which is crops into the sensor 1.1 times, which is not much at all, to give the sensor more room to maneuver for IBIS to work. And it still gets a full 4K readout from the sensor, and you get very nice stabilization, almost looking like cinema camera type stabilization, where it just looks nice, it looks natural, it doesn't look like gimbal, and it doesn't look like it's just warp stabilizer or something like that. Like I said before, the a7 III's 4K is sharper. However, the 1080p on the a7S III is a lot better than the 1080p in the a7 III. And before you go, oh, it is 2020, no one shoots 4K. Well, I happen to do corporate film and photography, as well as wedding films, as well as just standard documentary films, etc., etc. I can tell you right now, there is plenty of corporate jobs, corporate commercial work, that all they really want is 1080p delivered, because a lot of times the 4K file sizes are just too large for them. Believe it or not, some of these people who run like the, I guess, marketing or video department for a lot of these companies, their computers are quite crappy. So I've sent 4K files to companies before, and they complained that it's too large, and I had to downscale to 1080, and they're very satisfied with the 1080p size and the quality. So there's plenty of use still for good 1080p, whether you believe it or not. But as you can see, 1080p in the a7S III is just simply better. It is a downsampled 4K image to a 1080p image versus, I think, an a7 III, due to the sensor's 24 megapixels, it is a pixel bin or some type of processed 1080 from the 24 megapixel sensor. With that being said, I know this is just a videography based video. A7 III does have other benefits such as photography. It is 24 megapixels. RAW, you get as much dynamic range as possible. Great eye autofocus. Yes, the a7S III has a newer autofocus system from Sony, but the a7 III is still no slouch. I mean, to be honest with you, a7R3, a7 III's eye autofocus, face detection, whatever it is for photography is pretty much as fast as you would ever need as a photographer. Like, there's no complaints about this autofocus system, period. So the extra autofocus system from the a7S III, a7R4, etc., and the newer Sony camera bodies is just a plus, okay? But the biggest thing in terms of autofocus is definitely the face detection and eye detection, as well as continuous touch tracking of the Sony a7S III that the a7 III does not have for video. This video autofocus is simply amazing. I mean, I'm telling you this right now. Some of you might disagree, but this is the system that I think in the future would eliminate a lot of jobs in terms of a focus puller or like bigger production teams, because this camera, as well as FX6, FX9, and also on, you know, I don't want to say this, but Canon cameras with their autofocus system and stuff, they are going to eliminate a lot of need for like massive teams, especially if that one cameraman could be the DP, the focus puller, and everything with accuracy, simply because these cameras have so much great autofocus technology in them that it really eliminates the need for additional crew. So it eliminates, you can now do big high-end jobs for probably less money, or you can do it for the same money and just pocket it for yourself as a DP, as a cameraman, as a focus puller, what have you, with just a camera like this. I mean, literally the Sony a7S III is cinema quality. Like, you could get great image, great footage out of both of these cameras. You could do big end jobs. I've done big corporate jobs with a7 III. You could do it today, still 2020, 2021. I did it all of 2019, all of 2018 with this camera. Did $60,000 plus corporate projects. No complaints with the a7 III. However, there is something to said about the fact that the Sony a7S III has usable S-Log3 due to 10-bit codec. This does not. 8-bit, I never recommend using S-Log for an 8-bit due to banding and color issues. That's why I stick with Cine 4 or HLG3 every time I use a7 III. Dynamic range, to me, in these cameras is what makes things look cinematic, filmic, what have you. It's the dynamic range that makes what you see in movies and in like higher end TV shows, Mandalorian, Netflix stuff. It's dynamic range that makes it look good. If you want the Sony a7S III to look completely cinema, just get cinema glass. If you don't have cinema glass, if you can't afford it, you don't want that like sharpened technical look, you want to get rid of that, you could use your photography based E-mount glass, such as this 2470 DG-DN. DN stands for D's Nuts from Sigma, or any other Sony E-mount autofocus lens. Slap a 1/8, 1/4 black pro mist or some other diffusion filter onto the lens, and it should soften it up just enough, give it that nice little glow to make it look more like a cinema lens. With that being said, other things to consider is the menus in these cameras. Obviously, the Sony a7S III has a new touchscreen, which flips out like this, which in my opinion is beneficial mostly for people doing videos like this, such as myself. Right now, I'm shooting also on a second a7S III for this video with the lens flipped out so I could see myself. But I feel like a lot of times I actually just prefer, if I'm filming 95% of the time, this is all I need. When I'm filming documentaries, when I'm filming weddings, when I'm doing corporate shoots, interviews, this is the only type of screen I really need. This is really just beneficial for obviously filming like this. And if you're like shooting up high and you want to see what you're filming from up here, that is pretty much it. Because in my opinion, walking around filming documentary stuff with a screen like this, it could easily get hit, damaged, what have you. And it's also good the fact that you can close it and protect the screen this way. But in my opinion, if you are behind the camera, I would much prefer this screen. So this is a very subjective thing. The screen is really dependent on what you're doing, what you like to do. In my use, I do both this talking head crap for myself as well as filming stuff. So this screen works better for me in that regard. All in all, I mean, custom buttons, etc., it's all the same. Menu system, I never had a problem with this menu system. As a matter of fact, I barely even use the touchscreen on this. I still use the actual dials and stuff going through the menus. So it is, once you have things set up the way you want, I find that I don't really have to go into it too much. But the biggest advantage on the a7S III is the fact that you could change things while you are still filming. You could change audio levels. You could change white balance. You could change every little thing on this camera pretty much while you're filming, versus you would actually have to stop recording, which on the a7S III you actually have to stop recording to change things on the a7 III, all the settings, etc., etc. Other things of note, the record buttons are in a different place, but to be honest with you, you can map all these buttons however you want. So if you want your record button a7S III to be back here like the a7 III, you could just map it that way. You could map it to the shutter. You could customize all your buttons on both these cameras to do whatever it is that you want it to do. So no big deals there. With that being said, we all know the a7S III is the better video camera. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And like I said, you get smacked with a big black crane 2S in the face if you think that I am incorrect with my assessment. However, this is a $3,500 camera. This is $1,800, maybe even $1,400. Matter of fact, the a7R III pretty much has the same video capabilities. The a7 III right now is running for around $2,000 as well. $1,500, or even in some cases, if you buy this used, $2,000 or more less than the a7S III. Now, I'm going to be quite frank. Many of you could have this a7 III and do way better work than I would ever do on an a7S III. Simple fact, okay? I'm not the best filmmaker on the planet. And I am still learning every second of the way in my journey as a quote-unquote videographer, cinematographer, filmmaker, whatever you want to call it. I'm pretty much just a douchebag behind this camera trying to tell stories, which I'm sure everyone else is who claims himself to be a videographer is. So if for some reason, if you're new to this whole thing, you're just starting videography, you have a limited budget, don't feel bad that you could only afford a7 III. This is a great camera still. Like I said, you could do massive paying jobs with a7 III. Weddings, corporate work, this thing will do the job 100% of the time. Unless there's those douchebag companies that requires you to have a cinema camera. They're a bunch of douchebags. They don't know what the heck. They don't know what they're doing, okay? You could have easily small cameras like this and produce high quality work for them. But if they want you to roll in with a massive FX9, FX6, Red, whatever it is, just so they feel good about themselves, fine. You know, that's what they want. But what I'm telling you right now is a quick example. If you're going to shoot an interview and you want 2 angles and you only have $3,000, $3,500 to film an interview, you could just get 2 of these for the price of 1 of these and actually have 2 angles. You see what I'm saying? Like, you don't need an a7S III to produce great work. However, I'm at the stage in my douchebag career where I notice the difference in 10-bit color versus 8-bit color. I appreciate the ability to grade S-Log3. I appreciate the amount of different LUTs available for the S-Log3 versus me shooting HLG3, Cine 4. I'm pretty much limited to YouTube douchebag LUTs that usually makes my image look like absolute trash. So I end up just using Film Convert Nitrate, which works really well for HLG3 and Cine 4. So if you want to grade your a7 III, I recommend looking at Film Convert to grade your videos. I never really tried any like good custom LUTs from other YouTubers or people that I found that looks good with the Sony a7 III. That is just my personal opinion. Color is subjective. It is what it is. The a7S III, like I said, S-Log3, 10-bit 422, 422 works great for green screen work, which you will have to do a lot of if you're doing corporate film and photography. 420, multiple different codecs, 1080, 4K 120, great IBIS. Like, this thing is just loaded. So I'm at that point in my career where I appreciate these extra specs when I'm in post-production work. Does that mean that I can't do good work with a7 III? No, it just means that I know what I can get, and this is the camera, this is the right camera for me for what I do. And of course, I'm blessed enough to be able to afford this one. Matter of fact, I could afford 2 of them. But if you can't, you could get a7 III, and your talent will take you wherever you want it to go, okay? If you are an amazing filmmaker, if you just know what you're doing, the a7 III would do wonders for you. You create whatever story you want with the a7 III. It's all up to you. It's all about the user and his connection with his camera at the end of the day. Point blank. So, like I said, if you could afford a7S III for video, buy it. 100% if you want the Sony system. Okay? Obviously, if you don't like Sony, there's plenty of other camera brands you could buy. I'm sure you do great work with them. But if for some reason you're at a point in your life, your point in your career, you can't afford a7S III. Of course, there's this whole COVID crap going on. 2020 has been a killer for a lot of us. So a7 III is perfectly enough. You could buy this used, $1,400, $1,500, go shoot a bunch of stuff, get paid, and once you have enough money, you could upgrade to a7S III. So there's nothing wrong with that. That is where I sit. That is where I stand. Thank you for tuning in. If you like this video, please give it a like. And of course, subscribe to my channel, hit the bell notification. It's greatly appreciated. It will help me continue to make this idiotic content for you to watch and throw up, because I am an ugly piece of trash. Until next time, lighten up.